And welcome to the first episode of Shift, the podcast. This is crazy.
Yeah, man.
I've been working on this for months and I'm super pumped, a little nervous. I'm sure I got lots to learn. So we're going to take it one step at a time.
Sure.
And I'm super excited. So, with me today is someone I consider to be a friend, part of my family, a mentor, Petie Kinder. Petie is the lead pastor of my church, Peak City Church. And as I was putting together this podcast, which I really sort of was like, man, I don't even know who to ask first. I don't know where to go. I'm not sure what to do. But the reality is that this podcast is all about radical accountability. It is about living in just that raw state
Yeah.
and really sitting in vulnerability. And my intention is to expose our listeners and our viewers in some cases to people who've shifted their own lives, who've overcome things and really created radical progress towards something bigger than themselves.
So good, man.
A lot of this content is going to be things that interest me. And my hope is that it helps you. And my intention is to guide the conversations towards examples of where vulnerability and accountability, and in a lot of cases, grace, have had positive impacts on people's lives. So when I thought about who am I bringing on first, it was Petey kept coming to mind. Like you just kept coming up, you kept coming up, and I was like, really, really. And so there's my own faith journey, which is a piece of this. But as I was thinking about you last night, which is kind of weird to say, but you told,
It's all
uh,
good.
I was thinking about you as I was going to bed last night, and I actually had to get out of bed and make some notes because,
I love it.
bro, you came to Colorado Springs from, I believe, Indy
Yep. Indiana.
last December
Yep.
and moved your family from an area that you'd been for years and you knew and you probably were pretty well rooted and you had a good thing going.
Yep.
And you brought your family all the way to Colorado Springs. And I don't know if you've done this exercise, but I want to share something with you. Since you got to town, you've been in a new city,
Mhm.
a new church. We had a global pandemic, which
Yep.
canceled sports, concerts, all kinds of restaurants. I mean, you probably haven't even tried all the best restaurants in town yet.
Trying to.
No school, um, which was crazy, right? So there's all this really raw first time stuff. And then socially, we've been dealing with George Floyd,
Yep.
Ahmaud Arbery,
Yep.
the unrest that comes out of that, heavy topics. Um, the election, right? Like that's a heavy topic. And church and politics, sometimes those are intertwined in ways that maybe we can get into.
Yeah.
Um, 2.1 million acres of wildfires. We bought a building. We raised $1.4 million. And I say we, meaning just because I show up there on Sundays, but
Yeah, man.
you and the elders and the people involved in the church raised 1.4 million, I think, in like 30 days.
It was a lot in a little amount of time.
A lot in a little.
Yeah.
And then, oh, okay, so you buy the building. So now we have to build a building. So there's that, like raising the money was just the first step.
Yep.
And so, like, of all the people I know who've probably faced more challenges and more stuff and had to get raw, be vulnerable, take accountability. Like, and if you're watching this right now, you can see the smile on this man's face. Like, he has taken it with grace. He has just rolled with it. And it was like a no-brainer for me
Mm.
to ask you to come and share and talk and just sort of vibe on what's been happening. And I really want to like just welcome you
Thanks, man.
and say thank you for taking the time to do this because like crazy and
And there's no family in our church that I think that I've met so far that I think embodies that value we have of being raw. That's something we talk about at church all the time. Is we don't want to live with the pressure to perform, man. We want to walk in vulnerability and transparency and be raw. And I'm telling you, y'all are. I've told you this before over coffee. I've told you in person, man. So this isn't saying anything to impress the people. You all live raw, man. You live vulnerable and transparent, and I think you're making our church a better place because of it, man. So when you said you're doing a podcast about this, you want to have me on, I was like, man, that's a no brainer, man. When we moved to Colorado Springs, you all were one of the first families we met. I mean, I think you all had just been coming to church for a couple months when we got
Yeah,
there. And I remember meeting you and find out how many kids you have. I was like, I love this guy, and I want to get to know him and his wife and his family more. And so, man, we love you guys, and happy to help in any way I can on this podcast, man.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it. And we do have a grip of kids. It's like I think I got a basketball team and a couple on the bench. So
You got a bench full of them, man. It's great, man.
we
I got
do.
three. I feel like that's maybe one too many. Don't tell my kids that, but uh, eight, man. Y'all are heroes.
Yeah,
Y'all are
it's well, I don't know about that. We're one day at a time. Luckily, two of them are adults and have gotten into their own stuff. So
That's
I
right.
really am only like managing six right now. So
Yeah,
you know,
I hear you.
it's good. It's good though. But I want to start if we can, I kind of want to start with just your story. Like I know you've battled with some stuff and I don't want
Yep.
to speak out of turn or say anything you don't want to say, but I know that you've been vulnerable enough to share some of your own struggles,
Yeah, man.
and I'd love to know, a little bit of your story and just kind of tell folks where you're coming from. And
Yeah,
it's you don't necessarily have to share anything you don't want to share, but I'd love
totally.
to hear you just kind of tell us who you are and what you're about and how you ended up in Colorado Springs.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. So I grew up with what I feel like was a pretty average American upbringing. Like no crazy huge drama or trauma. Good mom and dad. We didn't grow up going to church, but I mean that's like most families in America. It's like it's probably 50-50 on how many people grew up going to church, how many people didn't, and that number's getting less and less as the years go by. So I mean, I didn't grow up going to church. I didn't grow up with any like aspirations to be a pastor or anything like that, man. My family would go occasionally on Christmas and Easter and check things out, but we're just a pretty normal family. And I had that normal teenage upbringing where you do what every other teenager does. You're chasing the things that teenagers are chasing. You're chasing popularity. You're chasing girls. You're chasing the party scene and all that. And it was just normal, right? But I think that what I discovered by the time I was probably about 17 or so is what I feel like I've seen to be true now that I'm older. Is that average, like the average American life, the normal way of doing things is so messed up, so broken. When you live life just like everybody else is living, the way our culture's going, it leaves you with a lot of let's say it like this: you enter adulthood with a lot of unhealthy habits, uh, jacked up perspectives. You drag a lot of baggage in. Like normal in our world, I feel like is just messed up. And so, man, I found myself to be 17, 18 years old, doing what everybody else was doing, and I was just crazy unhappy. I mean, I didn't feel like I was fulfilled. I felt like I'd go to bed as a late teenager, feeling like there's got to be more to life than what I'm experiencing right now. And so I got invited to go to a church, and I said no for a long time. And I had this one friend that just kept inviting me, kept asking me to come with him. wasn't pushy with it, but just kept asking me. Finally, I heard there's a couple of hot girls that went to his church, and so I was like, man, if there's some girls there, I'll go check it
That's
out.
it.
That's it, man. So I
That's
went,
it.
and that church changed my life. That was the church where I finally saw a group of people that they weren't weird about faith, they weren't pushy with it, but they just seemed to genuinely love people, and they were so inclusive of anyone that walked in the doors, even people like me who I didn't have a reputation at school of being like a good guy or a faith guy or anything like that. And they just loved that I was there. And I just saw great examples of godly families that loved each other. And then I heard them talk about faith in a way I'd never heard before. It's like that they
Mm.
were presenting Jesus, who he really is, what he's really all about, in a way I had never heard before. And to hear, what the New Testament says that God is really all about, and who Jesus really is, man, that messed me up in the best way, changed my life forever. And so I made that decision to start following Jesus at age 17. And I haven't always done it well, but man, I've never looked back. So I've been following him now for about 18, 19 years. Um, and it's been just a life-changing decision to start following him. And that led me on this road of becoming a pastor, which is like the last thing in the world There's still people in my hometown that when they hear what I do now, they're like, Petie, who? He's doing what? Because like I was not that guy. But man, I'm just telling you, following Jesus has made my life not easier at all, but just qualitatively better in so many ways that I just kept feeling like I needed to tell more and more people about who he really is. I think our world is really has a skewed perception thanks to Christians, thanks to churches, thanks to culture, thanks to all kinds of things. I think our world's got a really, really skewed perspective on who God really is and who Jesus really was, what he's really all about. And so, man, I'm just consumed with telling people about who he really is, and that kind of put me on the road being a pastor, being a preacher, and stuff I never thought I would do, man. And so, been serving in ministry
So
for
good.
about 15 years. I've served in Seattle, Washington, Indianapolis, Indiana, Kentucky, where I'm originally from, and now Colorado Springs. And so, yeah, I mean, it's it's kicked my butt in a lot of ways. I've dealt with all kinds of things. Like I said, becoming a follower of Jesus hasn't made my life easier. It's just made it better in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I've still dealt with depression. I've still dealt with addiction. I've still dealt with, my marriage has been on the rocks before. We've had to go through counseling, all kinds of that stuff. So it hasn't been like, the easiest road in the world, but it's been so good and so rewarding. And I feel like I'm a better man, better husband, better father. There's so much about who I am that I would not be where I am if it wasn't for that decision to start following Jesus. And so that's why I'm here in Colorado Springs. That's why I came across you. That's how we met.
I
And
love it.
yeah,
When
man, that's where I'm at.
when you decided to become a pastor, like,
Hmm.
so there's a couple of things that jump out at me from that. One is that, like, I think people have this mythology that, like, pastors are, they got their life together, everything's smooth, everything's good. Usually they don't make any money, or they're like televangelist pastors who are loaded on private
Right.
jets, right? Like, there's,
Right.
I don't think people, like, in general think of like this middle ground. And so, and at 17, when you're thinking about career and family and what your life looks like, the idea of seminary isn't super attractive.
Mhm.
So I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing, like did you come to that decision, like, were you pulled into that, or was that something like you felt like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. I think for me, when I when I first felt that pull to start following Jesus and then telling more people about him. And I started just basic. I remember I shared Jesus, like who Jesus really was, with my best friend who I grew up with. And he was like me, didn't grow up going to church, and then I started sharing it with my mom and dad and getting them to come with me to church. And it was just, I mean, whoever I loved and whoever I came across, I just wanted to share this really, really important part of me now with them. And as that grew more and more, I was like, you know what? I should probably learn the Bible because that seems like an important thing. And
Kind
so,
of, maybe.
I didn't grow up reading it. I didn't know anything about it. So like when I showed up to Bible college, seminary, man, my first class was on the book of Acts, and I had never read the book of Acts. So I was like, this will be cool. I guess I'll read this and study it. So for me, it was way more about just like learning how to be a better follower of Jesus. And then I just kept walking through the open doors that came in my life. I've served in basically every role in the church you could ever possibly imagine, and it's just because I kept walking through open doors. So it's like I've worked with kids, and I honestly, like, when I was a kids pastor, I don't really like kids outside of my own, but
Same.
but it was
And
like
I got a bunch of them.
right, but it was an open door, and so I just kept walking through the open doors, man. And so it wasn't like I've got these aspirations to be this big, well-known pastor or anything like that. It's just I want to tell as many people as I can about Jesus, and every time I've had an open door to do it, I take it. And so that's led me all over the country. It's led us to pack a crap ton of life into 35 years so far. So there's no real big grand master plan. I told our church this past weekend, I hope to be a pastor for the rest of my life and tell people about Jesus till the day I die. But if I don't get to be a pastor as my job someday, I'm still going to tell people about Jesus because it's changed my life, man. When I found out who he really was and what he's really all about, everything changed.
Yeah. That's crazy. I love it. You've said a couple of times who Jesus really is,
Mhm.
and that's a interesting use of words. because a lot of people would say, do you know Jesus?
Right.
Or what do you know about Jesus? So I want to do two things. I want to recognize the amount of like vulnerability in just going through the doors that are open for you,
Yeah.
because that definitely takes a relatively high level of trust
Hmm.
that I don't like kids, but I'm being called to do kids ministry,
Yeah.
and stepping into that and being able to learn from that and move forward. So I want to honor that first of all, because I think that could go over people's heads very easily. I want to kind of approach this from a space of the podcast as a whole isn't really about faith. There's tons
Right.
of faith-based podcasts out there that give
Sure.
people a place to unpack their spiritual journey, their faith journey. This isn't this.
Yeah.
I wanted you to be on because you've had a huge impact on my life in the last 18 months or so. Because realistically, yes, we started attending Peak City like the week or two before you arrived.
Yeah.
And one of the things that drew me to the church and reconnected my walk with Christ is the way that Peak City and the others involved in that ministry talk about who Jesus really is.
Amen.
And it's come up a few times. So I would love it if you would sort of unpack that a little bit, because
Yeah.
it's not just Jesus.
Yeah. And man, honestly, I think that's why, if you get anybody listening to this that, isn't interested in faith, I think it's a great segue into what we are really talking about. Because, for me, when I heard about who Jesus was from the world and from culture, from grandma and grandpa or whoever, it just always seemed like it was and you've heard me say this before, Keith, but it seems like that God was portrayed as a kind of random rule-based God. It's this God who, he's got some things he really doesn't like you to do, and so you better not do them. If you want to make him happy, make sure you follow the rules. Don't do the bad things, do the good things. And it's stuff that, most of us struggle with. And so then it promotes this like, well, just act like you're a good person. Just put on your Sunday best and just act like you're better. Act like you're conforming to the rules, kind of hypocrisy that we're all sick of seeing. And so I just wanted nothing to do with that. But then once I got to know who Jesus really was, it's like, oh, no, no, no. What I saw is that Jesus was very comfortable around people who were nothing like him. One of our favorite preachers, Andy Stanley, always says that people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. He was very comfortable with people that disagreed with him. He's very comfortable around people who didn't live like him or obey him. And at the end of the day, when I found out that Jesus actually knows exactly who I am, he knows every dark thought, everything I've ever done, everything inside of me that's messed up. I'm fully known by him, yet I'm also fully loved. And there's unconditional grace and unconditional acceptance. And I don't have to perform to be accepted by him. When I started learning that stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, now I can get down to the real nitty gritty stuff of life. I can be vulnerable. I can be transparent. I can say, oh yeah, I've had this dark thought, or oh yeah, I've struggled with this addiction, or oh yeah, my marriage is here right now, and I can be just raw with it. That's a word we always use, right? Is
Yep.
raw. Um, I can be raw with it because, like, at the end of the day, God already knows it, and He already accepts me, and He already loves me, and at the end of the day, I don't have to feel that pressure to perform anymore. That was one of the things that drew me to the way of following Jesus. That I feel like for the first time, I could be honest, and I wouldn't suffer consequence for it. In fact, I would be rewarded for it. That kind of humble transparency, that kind of um, uh, commitment to becoming the person you were created to be, becoming a better version of yourself. That's actually something that God looks at and He loves. He's not surprised when you get raw. He knows it, and He
Yeah.
loves you. When I
Yeah.
heard that, man, that was game over, and that put me on the path towards vulnerability and accountability and transparency.
Yeah. It's crazy how different the story of the Bible or the story of Jesus is portrayed,
Yeah.
and we could spend days or weeks, and I'm sure there's whole courses in colleges centered around how religions have damaged, societies and and
Yeah.
and challenged things. For me, it was really interesting. I was raised in the church. I was raised Catholic, and nothing against any particular denomination that anyone believes in. It didn't align for me once I got old enough to leave the home because of very much what you said. It was checking the boxes, it was doing all the right things. And I got to a place where for me, I just felt like, okay, I've done enough in the, column of do nots
Right,
that
right.
I didn't see a way out for me. So I sort of just was like, I'm out. I did
Yeah,
enough. I lost the game. I got to go sit on the bench. That's it.
yeah,
And I didn't think about being able to be redeemed or being able to, like, I didn't have that relationship. And
yeah,
my daughter, one of my daughters, was very vocal about wanting to go to church and needing to go to church. And we kept driving by Peak City. Had another name at the time, but we kept driving by there, and I just felt called to go there. And so we did. And from jump, I was hit with this different reality and this different perception that kind of took me out of the Bible and just brought me into what Jesus taught.
yeah,
And I really broke down and kind of recognized my own arrogance, right? And I have this axiom that I try to live by is whenever I feel resistance, I want to lean into it. And so I was super resistant to taking my girl to church. And it was like, all right, well, am I going to man up and do what I teach others to do? Because part of my other business is coaching and mentoring and helping people to unlock their upper limiting beliefs and things of that nature. And I just got to this place where it was like, all right, it's time to put up or shut up. Like, I'm getting mad resistance. So I need to lean into that. And when I did, it was almost as if I was in a, like, I mean, so you're a fan of the UFC. So I felt
yeah,
like internally I was in the octagon.
yeah,
I was struggling with like, what is happening here? I believe these things. I've created these other stories. Religions are divisive. All these things that they, in hindsight, I was like, man, the arrogance that I walked with around those things that I truly didn't understand. And I could take bits and pieces of the information and make my argument and defend my belief. But at the end of the day, it was like, oh, but you're only playing with half the chess set, son. Like, what,
right.
like, what are you doing? And it took my child
Mm.
to
Wow.
be the mirror for me and say, hey, we need to go do this thing. And so we did. And she gets a little cocky once in a while because people like yourself are kind enough to talk about us and our involvement in church. She's like, yeah, I did that. That was me. And I'm like, yes, baby girl, that was you.
Oh,
And
that's so good. That's so
and that might have been God working through you. So you're just the messenger.
that's
So
awesome.
I love the way that we've been able to talk about that and how you and your leadership team have shifted the conversation towards the marks of the church, which are raw, passionate, and clear.
Yeah,
And and I struggle with the passion part.
yeah,
I'm real good. I'm real academic. I'm really straightforward, and I love to like get into the details of the thing. Um, and honestly, like I'm learning passion through this project because there's parts of me that I don't know where this podcast is going to go. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm being pulled to do it.
that's awesome.
And everyone I've asked and everyone I've invited to be a part of it hasn't just said yes, they've been excited to do it.
Yeah,
And I feel like there's some parallels there to sort of your journey where, you know, you came to Jesus at 17, but you didn't look back. Like you jumped all in.
yep.
And so I love the example that sets for people in
Thanks, man.
kind of listening and opening those doors and trusting where that's going to take you.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess kind of the thing that I want to ask is like, what's next for you? Like, I know you just had a birthday, so happy belated birthday.
Hey, thanks, man.
Um, and I know that, it was sort of a milestone because you're crossed into your late 30s.
Late
You're
30s,
getting old.
36, man.
So what's that next chapter look like for you? We talk a lot about next steps, right? So
Yeah.
outside of us opening a new building and what all the things that come with that, are you looking beyond that yet? Are you considering what the next steps are for you
Yeah,
personally, not necessarily?
yeah. I think that I feel like I'm doing the same thing now that I was doing when I was 17 and first starting to follow Jesus. I don't feel like a whole lot has changed, and so I just keep doing the same things over and over. Like I'm trying to make sure that I keep my eyes up and my head up for any open door to help people understand that Jesus loves them and Jesus is for them and they can be honest and raw and real and he accepts them as they are. And so, man, I've just been, that's been like my life's commitment. It's just, I'm gonna walk through that door. I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure that at the end of my life, more people understand who Jesus really is and what he's really all about. And so right now, man, I think, God's doing some incredible things. My family's loving where we're at right now. I think raising kids to me is, as you know, one of the most difficult things in the world. So I'm constantly thinking about, how can I help our church? How can I help people in our community? And then how can I make sure that, my wife and I stay real connected in our marriage and that we raise our kids really, really well. If you've been around the church world, you probably heard about pastors' kids and all that, growing up and being crazy and
Uh-huh.
how growing up in the church damages them. Man, I want a different story for my kids. I want them to grow up and be and feel like they were blessed and fortunate to be in a ministry family, not cursed by it.
Sure.
So I'm focusing a lot on that. But man, at the end of the day, I think one of the problems that we get into is making too many plans and too many goals that are too far out there. I think my short term, like 1 to 3 years out, is just I don't want to put any limits on what God could do through me and through our family. I just want to keep walking through all the open doors that we possibly have. If you told me, like, put on paper what's your selfish goal, my selfish goal is that we get to pastor here and lead at Peak City till I'm 65, 70 years old, and then hang it up and pass it on to the next great leader, and just do that, man. That's what I want. That's what I hope for. That's what I pray for. But more than anything, more than any of that, I just want, man, if I can help my neighbors, if I can help my family, if I can help people on my street, people in my community know that Jesus is for them, not against them, I'll die a happy
Yeah.
man.
That's awesome. It's so good. I've been putting a lot of thought lately into what it means to serve locally.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit in the beginning about like all the craziness in the world. And there's so much of it. And there's so many things that I think all of our hearts go out and get pulled towards things. Like when you have something like the murder of George Floyd,
Yeah.
like I get moved. I want to do something. I want to talk to people. I want to take action. And then a month later, we're focused on the next thing because I can't do anything about that situation. And so it's really been a thing that I've thought about a lot lately is not trying to solve the world's problems,
Right.
but really focusing on my kid. And I've had people ask me, like, well, what are you going to do about it? And my response has been, I'm going to raise my children to be compassionate and
Yep.
vulnerable and to give grace to others when they get wronged, because we all do the things that we get mad at everybody else for. Like,
Yep.
I mean, I've not taken anyone's life, but I've definitely used language that was divisive. I've done things that was divisive. I've been around people who've done things that maybe they shouldn't, and I didn't hold them to account for that. So in
Right.
some way, I feel like I've supported those things, right? And so for me, it's like I really have just turned everything into this local viewpoint of how can I help take my children, put them out into the world. And we luckily we got enough of them. It'll probably make some sort of impact, right? I got
Well,
enough.
you're so true in that. I think that, especially in the social media culture we got in the age, the digital age, there's such a value and a prominence placed on your platform, on how big and widespread your impact can be.
Yeah,
And if you look at any of the people that are really making a difference, it all just like if it gets to a huge platform, it's usually because they had a heart just to help locally, and it just kept helping people and helping more people and more people and more people. And man, if your heart is
yeah,
all just to help people, and it starts small, again, I go back to Jesus. He said,
yeah,
if you're faithful with little, I'll set you over much. It's like he ain't gonna set you over. He's not gonna help you have a massive platform if you're not faithful with the people in front
yeah,
of you. And at the end of the day, the people that are going to show up to your funeral are going to be your kids, your neighbors, people you went to church with. It's going to be the
yep,
people that you were the closest to locally. So man, why not
yeah,
focus locally?
yeah. I think it's such an important thing, and enough so that there's some like global organizations that my wife and I have been involved with for years that we're actually stepping back from because we feel like that time and energy that we've been putting towards those things, while they're helpful and they're certainly have merit and they're valuable, I feel like there's the impact is felt much stronger at home.
Yep.
And I use this analogy with another person I was talking to, but it's like if I fire a bullet from here to, the concrete wall that's 20 feet away from me, the impact is going to be pretty massive.
Yeah.
But if I do that and try and hit your house clear across town,
Yeah.
you won't even know. It won't probably won't even get there, right? And so the impact is just much smaller. And I'm looking at ways that like we can really have a stronger impact, which is also kind of selfish because, we give because we receive, right? Like I love being involved in all the things that I'm involved in because I have a really strong belief in proximity. Like
Mhm.
you can't hate close up,
Right.
right? And I think that might even be an Andy Stanley thing, but it's like you can't hate people and you can't um judge them, or it's one of the things that, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Clubhouse,
Yeah.
this new app that's relatively popular.
Yep.
I'm loving it because it isn't me saying something to you and then going and making something in the kitchen or leaving or what, and like just dropping it and taking off. Like I'm held to account for what I say because we're speaking to one another.
That's great.
And when we talk to one another, we act different. We
Oh,
act a little bit different, right? So I really think that if we could get that to roll in a little bit and be that local, it would be so much easier for people to get a better benefit out of it.
yeah. There's I've had people ask me before because like pastors always get um, you know, or you often see pastors that like try to write books and try to like you know do that kind of thing, and it almost always feels like you're trying to get a big platform, right? And I do have a passion to write. I mean, it's something it's like on my goals in the next 1 to 5 years is I want to start writing more. I want to start, but my goal is proximity. My goal is local. I
Yeah,
told my wife and a counselor of ours last year that my goal in writing is I'm writing for my kids, and if it ends up
interesting.
helping anybody outside of that, great. But I'm gonna try to write a book for my boys before they enter into their teenage years on how to get through the teenage years.
Yeah,
I wanna write a book for my kids on marriage before they get married. I want to write a book for my boys and my girl on leadership before they get into the workplace and start leading.
yeah,
And if it helps them, great. And that's my goal in my heart. If it helps beyond that, okay, whatever. That's icing on the cake. At the end of the day, I just want to impact them locally, close up at home.
yeah. I love that, and it's so great when the intention is that, right?
Right. Because it
Like, are
keeps
you?
your heart pure.
Yeah, well, it does. Are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield? He's
Not
a he's an author. He's got a new book coming out, but he wrote a book called the War of Art,
okay.
and it's all about how to lean into some of those goals and some of those desires. But one of the things that he talks about is if you feel called to do something, and he speaks about it mostly from the viewpoint of an author because he's an author and that's what he knows. But what he talks about is like when you feel called to do something, you do it because you have to do it, not because it's going to sell, not because people are going to like it. He said if you start thinking about, well, is so and so going to like, then just scrap it because you're not doing it for the right reasons,
Right.
right? So it was really helpful for me because I did write a book and I self-published a couple of years ago, and I had a lot of people ask me what it was about and why I was doing, how, like, was I going to go through this process or that process? And for me, it was like, it was cathartic for me. I had to get, and it was so easy to write. And I've started two other books that have kind of faded away because I was just told I had to keep writing, but it wasn't like those aren't the things that I want to write about. Um, and so yeah, I love that's the intention, right? And sometimes having the goal is much less important than having the intention to accomplish a thing, right? And then being trusting enough and vulnerable enough to go, I want to do this,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to put too much of a plan around it
Yep.
because I'm going to let God have his work in it, and I'm going to let him direct
Yeah,
where that goes.
that's so good. And isn't that weird that like in the especially post pandemic, the global digital age has made things seem like they're so online and they're so widespread. And if you don't have like nationwide prominence, then you're nothing. And in the middle of that, we all realize, nah, that stuff doesn't actually affect us as much as what's right up close.
No.
I think the digital age is actually going to push us towards more local, more up close and personal.
Hmm.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
this is why we're doing what we're doing as a church right now. You know, we're trying to make sure that everything we do is live and local,
Yep.
up close and personal. Because I think our world's starved for it, man. Weren't we supposed to talk about vulnerability and accountability? We're getting on to creativity.
Something.
We're
I
getting on.
love it.
I love it, man. This is great, dude.
I love it
I love it.
because I think the pendulum swings,
Yeah.
right? Like we get super digital, we get away, everything's online, and then it's like we don't feel fulfilled.
Right.
And then we shift away from that. And I love Facebook. I
Yep.
love the social media thing. But I'm a learner and I don't have empathy very low. So I'll see something and I don't tend to get wrapped up in it. I
Right.
can just look at it and go, okay, cool. What can I learn from that? What can I take? And I've got friends that I've met on Facebook first that are family now.
Yeah.
So I love that as a tool, but
It's
I
a
also
tool.
look at it like any other tool,
Right. It's a
right?
tool.
Exactly.
The tool.
Yeah. So I think there is vulnerability in that and being able to say, hey, this doesn't really serve me,
Right.
right? And
Well,
being
that's
able
what
because
people say when people tell me that the future of the church is all digital and all online. I'm like, bullcrap. That's crazy.
no.
It's a great
Mm-mm.
tool for people that don't want to show up to church and like be weirded out and check, like they want to check out what church is like before they step in. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that can replace the in-person gathering, the in-person meeting with people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even vulnerability and transparency across a screen, it's something, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
different when you're actually sitting with somebody in person, talking about what
Oh,
you're really dealing with, really struggling with.
yeah. And
Powerful.
like you could feel the energy shift, right? Like, I mean, just being in a room. If my first experience back at church had been online,
Right.
I guarantee you, I would have been on Facebook, in Twitter, checking, scrolling Instagram, not hearing the message necessarily, but 100% not feeling it. Like you walk into that room, and this is probably relevant to most churches. You walk into a room with worship music and other people, and you can sense the
Right.
energy that's vibing there, and you can tell what's happening.
Yep.
So and for me, the other piece that I really love that we've been talking about is like, and I don't know if we'll keep this in or not, but the church is not the building. Like
Right.
the idea that we can go grab coffee, three or four of us, and have community or small group or whatever that looks like, the need for human interaction and connection is so deep
Yep.
that I think the pandemic is going to bring people
I do too.
back into
Yeah.
like whatever that looks like. And
Yeah. Too. And that, and you can tell the vibe of people, good or bad. You know, when
100%.
you walk in, and it's a vibe of people that are judgmental and self-righteous, and they're
Mhm.
not getting raw. They're not there is not unconditional acceptance. There is conditional acceptance.
Yeah.
You can tell it from the minute you walk in. It's a vibe that gets communicated as soon as you
Yeah.
hit the room. So that's where I'm like, man, that like you can see that stuff. And so that's where I'm like, online, great tool. Make sure that the church isn't like killing chickens in service and doing some weird stuff.
Yes.
But it's a
Important.
tool. It's
Yeah.
not the end be all. Nothing's more
Yeah.
important than you and I linking up for coffee and being in person and actually life on life, man. Life on
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. You got to be able to live those things in community with one another, or it's just hollow. Like
Yeah.
it sounds good. It's just sound bites though. Like, there's no depth to it. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's such an important aspect that a lot of people, I think, during this time of pandemic are missing is that depth of community.
Yeah.
Uh, You know, mostly based in fear,
Yeah.
because of whatever noise or information or diet they're taking in of what's what. And and
Mm.
that for me has been, you know really interesting because, like I mentioned, like empathy's kind of low for me. So let's kind of shift this a little bit to talking about that though, because like as a leader in your community, you have to make decisions, and you don't make them on your own. You've got a team of people that you work with, but you guys got to make decisions about, masks, no masks, in person, not in person. How do we show up for the least of us, which is a real, thing. Because I mean, I, weather be damned. I got 4-wheel drive. I'll get there.
Yep.
But we got to consider like what risk are we putting people into, and I think that's also an area where you have to be really vulnerable
Mhm.
about what you're choosing into,
Yep.
because like I know you well enough to know that you got four-wheel drive too. Let's go. Let's all get in person. That community is important. But sometimes you have to put your own things aside to think about the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? What's the balance point, or is there one, or is it like you just feel it, or
I think one of the biggest keys in making decisions like that from a leadership perspective is to make sure that you're not being influenced by the wrong things. You know, like when we were making decisions to go online with our church services versus in person, when our COVID numbers were really, really high in our county, I just want to make sure that I wasn't being influenced by grumpy people in the church that just really wanted us to be together and meet in person and screw the government. I want to make sure I wasn't being influenced by liberal or conservative media. You know, I didn't want to be influenced by any of it. What I really want to be influenced by is just like what should always influence me as a follower of Jesus, which is, man, like what's the decision that we should make that would promote the love of people like Jesus loves people. And I hated doing church online. I'd rather be in person. But when our numbers are 15% positivity in the community, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, man. Numbers don't lie, but you can use numbers to tell whatever story you want. So numbers, you can kind of
proof?
make numbers lie.
Yeah,
But like I just looked at those numbers. Our elders and our leadership team looked at those numbers, and we were just like, man, the most loving thing we can do is make sure this thing doesn't spread. And we were starting to hear stories of people in our community that people in our church community who were getting COVID, whose family members were dying of
yeah.
COVID. And so we just thought of that and like, man, the most loving thing we can do is go back online for a little bit. And so, yeah, I just think you gotta make sure you're not being influenced by the wrong things. You got to be aware of what's driving you. Is it a fear of man? Is it a fear of someone's opinion of you? Is it um, a fear of the future? I mean, part of me, the reason I didn't want to go back online in November was that I feared that we would lose momentum as a church and we'd lose
Mm,
people. And you
yeah,
know what? We did.
yeah.
We had some people that left the church during those few months and they went to churches that stayed open and said, screw COVID. And that's all, that's good, man. That's all good. But if I had let that fear of losing people motivate me, I would have done what in my heart of hearts felt like was the wrong thing to do. I mean, I feel like the loving thing to do was go online for a little bit. So I think you just gotta make sure you're being influenced by the right things. You're always being influenced by something. There's no leadership decision you can make that isn't influenced by something. But you as the leader get to decide what are your inputs, what are you going to allow to influence you, and that requires a lot of vulnerability to say, you know what, I am afraid of losing people. I am
There it
afraid of
is.
losing momentum. I am afraid of coming off as too liberal or too conservative or is this a political statement? The election's next week. Like, man, I'm afraid of all that, but I'm
It's
choosing not to let that motivate me.
it's so crazy how everything today is a political statement.
Always.
Doesn't matter what you wear. I mean, I purchased a hat that I liked. I liked the message on it. I liked the words. And after I got it, somebody commented on it and I dug into it and found out that like the alt-right was using it for some sort, and I was just like, it's just a man, I can't win for losing. like it's crazy to me how everything is politicized. Like if I buy, 5 loaves of bread at the store, I get side eye from people because I'm hoarding. And I was like, no, fool, I got 8 kids and French toast takes 2 loaves of bread. Like, it's not me trying to hoard nothing. Like, you don't like come out and then they look at me because I drive a Mini Cooper as like my car. They don't see the, you know, 10-seat Suburban that's parked in the
Right.
driveway. They're like, you ain't got 8 kids. Trust me. Just because I drive a Mini Cooper sometimes does not mean it's a clown car. Right?
Everything's political though, man. Everything's political.
It's crazy. And I've kind of gotten to the place, and I think you could probably back this up, that like you almost have to just do what you're gonna do. And if you know your heart's pure and you know your intention is right, you can't control all the rest of it. Like
Right.
that's just
And then own it when people interpret what you do, and you have to go back and eat crow on anything, like I've had a couple of times where I've been online and I've been trying to lead our church through stuff, whether it's the riots at the Capitol building, all that kind of stuff, and I had people that interpreted everything I said in different ways, and some people really got hurt over some different things I've said over the past year. And you know
yeah.
what, it's great for me to hear that. And I love hearing, I love clearing up stuff like that, because I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together and learn more about each other, for me to grow as a
Yeah,
communicator. But it requires vulnerability and transparency to be able to say, ooh,
it does.
like there was something I said recently on a Thursday Night Live a while back, where I said, I was talking about systemic racism and some of this kind of stuff, and and I said the phrase that our country was solely built on the backs of black and brown slaves. Well, some people
Okay.
got offended by that.
Okay.
And honestly, I didn't think I said the word solely.
Sure.
And some people took that as a I and thought that I was kind of disparaging our troops. That, you know, the military has been a large part of building our country and all that. I was like, oh man, I didn't mean any disrespect to our troops. And so I had some people that I owned it and said, hey man, I'm so sorry that I said the word solely. But our country was built on the backs of black and brown slaves. It was also built on the sacrifice of our military, for sure. Both can be true. They're not exclusive. But it's great learning for me to know there's different people coming from different perspectives. And no
Yeah.
matter what is said in this political environment, there's no way you can walk the tightrope right now and not
Mhm.
offend someone. But I think what's required of a leader that's gonna bring people together. This is one of my convictions. We'll see if it's true in the years to come, because we're trying to bring people together. Is I think you got to just be willing to meet with people and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you felt that when I said that. I'm so sorry I said that wrong. I'm so sorry that what
Yeah.
I communicated hit you like that. That's not what I intended at all." Because at the end of the day, I'm not out to protect my butt. I'm not out to protect my reputation. I'm out to just help people come together and grow together and see who Jesus really is and what he's really all about. And I don't want
Yeah.
anything to deter people in that. But in this age, I'm telling you, you can't say anything.
No,
So,
it's
so really, you have to make the choice. Are you going to be a silent leader, or are you going to
yeah.
continue to speak and just own it when you're wrong?
Yeah.
And I decided at the end of the day, I've made enough mistakes in my life, and I feel like God has forgiven me of so much that it's easy for me at this point to say, "Oh yeah, I said something wrong. Sorry, I'm stupid. No big
Yeah.
deal." Like I can own that and I can grow from it. No big deal.
Yeah.
And when I say following Jesus has changed my life, for those of you that aren't faith people, that's part of what I mean. It's like, because I believe that God knows everything I've ever done and he loves me and forgives me anyway, I now
Yep.
have the freedom to own every mistake I make and not hide anything, because trust me, he's forgiven me of way worse than me saying one wrong word in a podcast.
Yeah. That's okay. I want to back that up a little bit
Yeah.
because that's super empowering. And so can you say that again? Like,
Because you know, the Christian Jesus teaching is that in Jesus you are fully known and fully loved, meaning God knows everything about you, every bad thought, every bad behavior, every dark skeleton you got in your closet. He knows it all. He loves you still, and he forgives you of all of it. And so if that's the case, I am now free to own my mistakes, to own my issues, because like whatever I've done,
yep.
it can't possibly mount up to the load of mistakes that I've already been forgiven for. So it's like the forgiveness I've received in
Yeah.
Jesus has now freed me up to be completely vulnerable and transparent, and I can own anything now.
Yeah. That's so good. I mean, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about, one of my intentions is to really help people identify what empowers them and what disempowers them.
Right.
And if it's disempowering to you, you got to kind of take it under, kind of put it on trial and go, is this really working for me? Is this really good for me? And not does it feel good. I saw something the other day that was like, if it doesn't feel good, it isn't of Jesus or it isn't of God. And I was like, that's not true, because I'm sure God's walked you through some things that you didn't feel great about in the moment, right? Like you don't just walk through open doors always feeling good about it.
Ooh,
But the idea that from an accountability standpoint, because I've come to the place, I mean, I've been sober 17 years. I've my wife and I renewed our vows. We skipped the counseling part and went straight to like we need a do over because
yeah.
I was not honoring our marriage in the beginning, and so we renewed our vows. and I've worked my way through, very much so because I wasn't a Jesus follower then, by the grace of my wife, who
Yeah.
accepted all my stuff and kept walking side by side with me when a lot of people told her she shouldn't.
Mm.
And it's analogous to what you're saying, but most people don't have partners who will put up with the things that my wife put up with. And so I love that, because that's kind of how I feel. Is you get to a place where it's like, well, if I'm forgiven, it doesn't give you carte blanche to just do whatever you want and then go, oh, well, I'm forgiven, right? It's kind of the opposite. It's like, if I'm forgiven, I want to show up as big as possible and as correct as possible. But I know that when I stray, or if I do something, especially in a time right now where like everything is offending somebody,
Right.
if they have the wherewithal to come to you and say, hey, you offended me, then you get the opportunity to own it and say, and it's funny because like we even argue nowadays about how to apologize.
Yeah.
like I'm sorry that made you feel that way, because I can't make you feel anything. Like, and is it right or wrong? Because like what you said, I would agree with. I mean, we could unpack the semantics of the word solely, but like the country was built on the backs of like that's kind of hard to, you know, argue. And at the same time, somebody listening to this right now is probably turned us off already because they disagree, but someone else totally agrees. And so which one of them is right, you
Yeah,
know?
and you just gotta you got to be willing to hear where people are coming from on that. I think there's normally always something when you get upset about something like that. There's always something motivated. There's always like there's a fear, or there's a wound, or there's a conviction that's great for everyone to learn. But like I love learning from people,
Yeah.
um and at the end of the day, man, that's where again I come back to Jesus. Like if you are fully forgiven, then you're safe. You're safe to just say what's on your mind, what's on your heart, and what you're dealing with. And I think that one of the things I was processing through, thinking about today's conversation is just vulnerability. To the degree of which you're willing to be vulnerable, that's the degree to which you're able to be held accountable. Like you are not able to be held accountable for that which you are not able to verbally say out loud and be vulnerable about, right?
100%.
But you're only willing to be vulnerable to the extent that you feel safe. Like if you're going to get judged, if you're going to get kicked out, if you're going to get the stank eye thrown at you, when you get vulnerable, you're not safe. Well, you have to have 100% safety if you want 100% vulnerability. If you want 100% vulnerability, that's what leads to true accountability and life change. And that's why I've found the way of Jesus to be so powerful, is that in Jesus, I'm fully known and fully loved. I have 100% safety. So
I
because
would,
of that, I'm vulnerable.
yeah, I would argue that only in Jesus would you have that, because for me, like, I feel like in order to be truly vulnerable, you have to be willing to be unsafe
Right.
to some extent, because I know there's things I've shared with my wife that did not go well,
Right.
and we've resolved those things. And I'm sure you've been in the same position, right? Where you have to be vulnerable about or take yourself to account for something, but the person involved is going to react and they're going to be hurt and they're going to have to grieve or process or whatever. And so to your point, like, it's really kind of only through the grace of God that you can be 100%. And the upside is, for me, what I've sort of realized recently is he already knows everything,
Right.
right? So eh, like not owning it is just lying to yourself,
Right.
because you can't lie, right? Like, and even if you don't believe in God or you're not a Jesus follower, most people of any spiritual path are going to say, that it's all universal and that it's all known. And so, even if you're not walking that path right now, you
Right.
kind of have to own that, like, none of us have secrets from the creator, whoever
Right.
that is for you, right? And that was very freeing, because I've been doing a lot of work with my own wife in regards to, like, I have to go down this road, and like this podcast, this experiment that I'm doing, this project, it takes from her time, it takes from her thing, and she doesn't fully understand it necessarily. um but I'm like drawn into it. And it's like, I have to share that with her that like, I don't even fully understand what I'm doing yet. I just know I got to do it. And I know that somebody listening at some point is going to make a shift in their life that is going to help them improve. And
Yeah,
that's going to have a ripple on their kids, on their spouse, on their parents, whoever. And like, that's work that I can't shy away from.
it's great, man.
And so, yeah, it's just the idea of God knowing everything already frees you up to be totally raw.
Yeah.
That's profound, man.
Well, and that's why I think that even if you wouldn't consider yourself a faith person or a God person, I mean, like you said, you know, there are no secrets from the creator. Even if you don't believe in a creator, even if you're in an atheistic place, there are no secrets from yourself. Like, you know, like each of
Mm-hmm.
us knows how messed up we are if we come to terms with it. Like, we know the
Yeah.
stuff that goes through our mind and goes through our heart. And that's why I think, you know, and this is going to sound like a typical pastor speak a little bit. I just think no matter what you believe, I think you would benefit from being a part of a faith community and being part of a church. Because especially if it, I mean, I'll say exclusively if it's a Jesus loving, Jesus preaching, teaching church. Because I'm
Yes.
telling you, if there's a church that is really consumed with the teachings of Jesus, you're going to find there a whole bunch of people that are messed up like you are, that have issues like you do, but who are filled with grace and compassion and who are able to hear what you're going through and go, oh yeah, I've been there too. Same here. I've been there. Is it going to be hard for them to swallow? Absolutely. But
Sure.
in the way of Jesus, the reason that we have accountability partners, reason we get raw with each other is that if I share something with you that's really, really hurtful about something I've done or makes you think, man, that like Petie's messed up, Petie's crazy. Yeah, it's hard because I don't know if you fully accept me or not. And I don't know if I'm fully safe yet, but I got vulnerable with you and that was a risk. But now it gives you the opportunity to grow through it and say, okay, my
Yeah.
first reaction to him was, man, I can't believe a pastor said that. Or I can't believe a pastor thinks that. Or I can't believe, man, that's messed up. Then it gives you the opportunity to go, well, wait a minute. Maybe I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat, and I've dealt with stuff like that before too. And it gives you a chance to more honestly evaluate yourself. It gives you the opportunity to grow in grace and forgiveness. I mean, I laugh all
Yeah.
the time with my wife. Like, I've given my wife so many opportunities over the course of our marriage and our relationship to grow in grace and forgiveness. She's had, I mean, she's just had to, you know.
Yeah.
But I also know
But
friends.
you gave her that opportunity. See, like what a gift that you've given her.
Right. What a gift. But here's the thing, though. I know friends. I know pastor friends who've never gotten honest and raw with their spouse
Mm-hmm.
about who they really are. And the reason they don't is that they're afraid of what they're going to think of them.
Yep.
And I just say, okay, that's fine if you want to. That's cool. But at the end of the day, you are robbing your wife of the opportunity to know who you really are,
Yeah.
to fully know and fully love you, and to in
Yeah.
doing so become more like Jesus. So I mean, this is why James, the brother of Jesus, would say, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. And that's not like a miraculous, like, you know, smack somebody in the forehead and they're healed.
Yeah.
It's the truth about what you and I are talking about, what your whole podcast is about, is that when you get vulnerable and you confess what you're really going through, it bakes in accountability to your life. To the degree which you're vulnerable, to that degree you'll be held accountable. And that's how you
100%.
find true healing and true restoration in your life, is when other people know what you're dealing with and they love you and accept you anyways. Oh
Yep.
my gosh, man, that is such a freeing and liberating experience. It's
Yeah.
so good because it pulls that addiction, that thing, or the sin, the mistake, whatever word you want to use, no matter what your faith background is.
Sure.
It drags that thing that's had power over you out into the light, and now that power is given no longer to the addiction, no longer to the substance, no longer to the relationship, whatever. That power is now given to the person you told it to.
Yeah.
Now they have the power to say, hey, you told me this last week. How's that going?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that right there is a liberating, transforming experience, and that can happen. I know skeptics right now listening to this are thinking that can happen outside of a church for sure. That's
100%.
just basic principles of life. I'm just
Yes.
telling you, the church of full of Jesus followers, where the message of who Jesus really is being taught, you're going to find a whole bunch of people where you could have that with, even if you don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we say things like, at Peak City, you can belong before you believe.
Yep.
You can come here and receive all the benefits of community before you don't even have to believe.
Yeah. It's so good. It's so good. And I think the thing that I would take from that also would be to invite people. If you hear somebody say something or act in a way or put out an idea that you're confused by or you're hurt by or you're conflicted by, let them know that.
Yeah.
Fire off an email. Say, "Hey, can we grab coffee?
Yep.
Tell me more." One of the biggest tools my wife taught me, and I will share with as many people that'll listen, is the ability to say to somebody, instead of, "Well, that's crazy," or "You thought what?" or "You said," is, "Tell me more."
Tell me more.
Because it immediately gives them permission to expand on the idea without them needing to know that you think they're nuts
Right.
or that you're pissed about what they said, and just go, "Oh, well, tell me more."
Mhm.
And then you get the context, because I think a lot of times we say things, like, the country's built solely on the backs of black and brown people. That could probably be received 5 or 6 different ways,
Mhm.
and so I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
And it requires the people you're in relationship with to have the permission and the comfort to come to you and say, "Hey, what did you mean by, tell me more?" Because
Right.
that hurt, right?
Yep.
And then when you get the opportunity to explain yourself, I think 9 times out of 10 you don't even have to apologize, because then they're able to go, "Oh, okay, cool, because what I heard was this whole other thing and we was about to throw down."
And it's
Right.
so funny. So it's like when that happens, and it's so funny because I know people from our church are going to listen to this, which is hilarious because I didn't even plan on sharing this whole thing, but it's a great thing for us to learn from. When that happened, I actually went out to pizza and beer with a guy from our church, a good friend of mine, who heard that and he did exactly what you're saying. He's like, "Help me understand.
Yeah.
You said that. Here's what I heard. Here's what I was thinking. Just help me understand." And when I shared my perspective with him and and I shared where that was coming from um, and you know how when the riots were happening at the Capitol, that I had friends, dear friends of color who were asking me, "What do you think about this? What are you going to say about this? How are you going to lead your church through this?" And so just hearing those pieces of information help. And at the end of it's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Well, here's what I was thinking." And I got to learn from him. I mean, it's just a
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful back and forth. And I think that is such a crucial piece to the like how do we fix
Yeah.
our culture and our country right now is the ability to like have civil disagreement.
Yep.
I mean, civil disagreement is just not even heard of today.
It's almost non-existent, and I think that experience that you just shared, what that does is it builds trust,
Right.
because the next time you say something that that person doesn't fully understand, he's not going to use his own filters and bias to create a story,
Right.
which, and I don't mean that in a negative way. We all have filters. That's why we receive the same 7 words in a different way,
Yep.
right? We all have filters. We all have bias. It's from our upbringing. I mean, like, and we all use those in different ways. I mean, you tell me you're from Kentucky, and I immediately think that you drive a pickup truck, that you drink bourbon, that you know, XYZ, right? Whatever those things are. And while you do drink bourbon,
Dude,
which
you had one out of those two things right.
yeah, I got one right, right? But like we make these judgments, and the more that we have community and conversation with one another, the more we build trust, and you get to know somebody's heart, and you have to go, "Oh, wow, okay, well, I heard it this way, but I know Petey,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't mean that."
Right.
And so, and the fact that like they're able to ask you and you're able to communicate it, because a lot of times I hear people say things and then I'll ask them, "Well, tell me more," and they don't have anywhere to go, and it's like, because they're just reading the headlines and they don't really understand.
Yep.
And that's where I think the vulnerability piece comes back around to like mean what you say, and if you don't understand or you don't really believe it, be open to like, "Oh, maybe spouting off what so and so said about this isn't like the gospel," right? Like, we need to dive in a little more, which unfortunately not everybody has time for. We live in such a crazy world where everybody, you got 2 income homes, you got people with, you know, they're just trying to put food on the table sometimes.
Well, it's hard. I think that what you're talking about that and what we're talking about, that civil disagreement, that ability to seek to understand before being understood, all of that,
Mm-hmm.
it's great and it sounds awesome. I think what I long for and I pray for, especially for our church community, is just that people would see the beauty of that and not just the pain. Because you know that living in that tension, it just doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And the easier option would be to do what the rest of the world is doing, which is just like huddling up with their people that believe exactly what they believe, and retracting
Yeah. Finding that
your
echo chamber.
participation. Yeah, find the think tank. Find the think tank, and that would be easier. And honestly, I've seen it in churches. I've seen it everywhere. There's a lot of churches out there that are just filled with people that they all vote the same way. They all think the same way. There is no need to seek to understand because they all understand each other.
Yeah.
And that's why I love Peak City, or I love our church family so much. But I just pray that our people continue to see the beauty in that, because it is hard. I mean, it's awesome for me to be able to say in a setting like this, because anybody that's listening that doesn't go to church, they're sitting there thinking, man, there's a church out there that has Democrats and Republicans sitting side by side.
Side by
There's
side.
yeah, like there's a church out there that has pro-life and pro-choice people sitting next to each other. There's a church out there that has all kinds of spectrums all represented,
Yep.
and that sounds awesome to the world outside, because that's what our world needs.
Yeah.
I just know that it's hard when you don't always leave feeling like your views were always affirmed and represented.
Yeah.
And so I just pray that our people really see the beauty of it, because I do think it's the key to helping the world understand who Jesus is, and I think it's the key to healing our country and our culture in a lot of ways. But man, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that.
It's like the rubber band illustration I've seen so many preachers use. It's like a rubber band that isn't held in tension has no power. You
Yeah.
hold it on one side, there's no power.
Just
You hold it on
lamp
the other, there's
just
no power.
there.
You hold both sides together, that's where the power is. But that tension spot,
Yeah.
oh, it's just uncomfortable to live in. But that's
Yeah.
where all growth happens, and that's
Well,
why I'm praying that all of our people, not just our church, every people, every major group in the country, I'm praying that we just get to a place where we crave that and we look forward to that. We don't
yeah.
reject that because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. We have to. I mean, there's really two states of existence in nature. There's growth and decay. Like and that's the thing. And where I've sort of come, and you just nailed it perfectly, is so many of us are trying to resolve the tension.
Yep.
And it's the wrong mission.
Yep.
It isn't to resolve the tension. It's to find your space in it,
Yep.
and to recognize that without it, there's no growth.
Right. You
and,
gotta live.
and and some people will claim to be content. I've got colleagues and friends who've been doing the same thing for 25 years, and they're gonna retire from that, and they're gonna stay in their one little house that they bought when they were 25, and they say they're content. I don't believe them though.
Right.
I really don't. And because there's no growth, right? And I love the way that you hit that. And so, I mean, honestly, I think that's a really great place to sort of like wrap it up, because it gives people who are listening something to really marinate on.
Yeah.
Um, but I do want to ask a couple of just open-ended kind of questions
Love it. Come on.
so we can give people somewhere to go. So first of all, what's your favorite bourbon?
Whoo, man.
I know it's a tough question.
Well, here's the thing on bourbon. Because of the way bourbon has just exploded in the market over the past several
Hmm.
years, the stuff has gotten expensive. So
This is true.
your boy doesn't drink expensive bourbon. So when I say what's my favorite, there's some big time bourbon connoisseurs out there. They're going to be like, really? I'm
What?
like, well, I'm not spending more than like 40 or $50 a bottle, man. The pastor's budget ain't allowing for that.
Right.
So man, I Bullet bourbon is probably my,
Mhm.
my my most regular that I purchase often. I think you can do a lot with it. So I like Bullet. Used to be a Woodford Reserve guy just because I
Mm.
actually the first church I ever worked at was in Woodford County, Kentucky. So it's like
Okay.
so that's kind of like a home
Yeah, yeah.
allegiance. But I'd say Bullet's probably my favorite. Um, yeah, but I mean I'm not picky as long as it's like above $15 a bottle. My
I hear
taste
you.
is about the same. I'm
Yep.
I'm good either way, bro. I'm good.
Now, are you straight? Are you a little bit of spring water? Are you over ice?
I'll mostly go neat.
Okay.
Occasionally I'll go ice. but mostly just neat, man. Just straight neat.
Yep.
I like it, man. It's good.
I love it. I used to like it a lot, and I used to drink Woodford, and I was a Maker's guy for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But what I discovered is that the McCoy clan history is not jive well with the spirits.
Yep.
So I steer I steer clear of them.
You gotta know how you handle it, all that, and
100%. Yeah.
absolutely.
I
I love
love the craftsmanship, the history, the just there's so many things about it that are just cool.
it. Yeah, yeah,
The I still watch all the documentaries that come out, and I love watching.
yeah.
But yeah, I do not partake. Um, okay, so the other thing I want to ask you is think back in the last 12 months or so, and if you got to go a little farther back because it's pandemic season, what's the best $100 you've spent?
Mm.
And it can be like a little more if you know.
Yeah. I think this is gonna sound weird, but especially because we were just talking
I,
about bourbon. This
I
is gonna
like
make it
where
this is gonna make it sound like I'm like a really really bad pastor because I'm gonna talk about I'm talking about drinking and smoking.
ah
Anybody that watches this that's under the age of 18 or anything is they're gonna be like, who is my pastor? I tell you what, so I have a buddy, he's also in ministry, he's also a pastor. He was, last time we hung out, he was smoking his grandpa's pipe that his grandpa had smoked for 50 years, and he passed it down to him as like a
wow.
generational gift.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just the coolest thing. I was like, man, that's amazing that you have your grandpa's pipe from 50-year-old pipe that you're still smoking. Like, that is just so
Yep.
cool, you know. And I don't have like a super close. I didn't have a close relationship with either of my grandpas, but just thinking through generationally and like family tree stuff, I thought, you know what, I need to start thinking about what I'm going to give my kids and my grandkids one day. And I don't have a lot to give them. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go buy a nice pipe, and I'm gonna start smoking it from time to time. And one day I'm gonna be that cool old grandpa that says to his grandson, here's a pipe that I've smoked for 50 years and you can have it. And that to me is going to be such a rewarding thing. Comma and
Comma and
during the pandemic, I tell you what will make you feel no stress and put your soul at rest, knowing that everything's gonna be okay, is when you can sit on the back porch and smoke a pipe and look at the mountains and just see, you know what, it's all good. This is gonna pass. I've had some of my most meaningful conversations with God while smoking a pipe on the back porch, looking at the beautiful mountains, man. So it's been a very very good $100 spent.
I have to be honest, that is about as far away from an answer as I thought you were gonna say. What?
Uh,
I love it. I love it.
well,
And we've talked about this, being in your mid 30s and named Petie and all
yep,
that, and you've shared how it's where that comes from, but
yep.
being old man Petie is way cooler than 35-year-old Petie.
Old
But
man Pete.
35-year-old Petie sitting on the porch with a bourbon and a pipe, like you've given a lot of thought to this.
That's how. Hey,
I love it.
that's how I got through the pandemic. Okay, was just hanging out on the
That's
back porch,
amazing.
knowing, you know what, the world has seen far worse days than this, and we're gonna see better days, and this too shall pass, man. This too shall
I
pass.
love it. That is amazing. That is the best. Okay, so first episode or our first live interview that we're gonna do, and the answer to that question is a pipe. So I think you've set the bar pretty high on outside the box answers.
Well,
I
I hope it
love it.
helps, man. I hope it helps. I can recommend you to a good pipe shop here in town with great guys. They'll take care of you if you need
I
one.
I bet you could. I bet you could. I love it. So if you're looking for any advice on pipes, go find Petey
I can help you.
at Peak City Church,
That's right.
and he'll help you out. Somebody is going to show up at that church and ask you for some
Yeah.
pipe advice now. So
Also,
you
I'm
need
gonna
to
get
get an
some emails.
affiliate link.
Also, I'm gonna get some emails from people saying, "Hey, can you help me understand this pipe thing? Can you help me
Exactly. Tell me
understand
more. Tell me
the pipe
more.
and bourbon thing? Tell me more."
I love it. I love it. Listen, man, I couldn't be more grateful, and I'm so appreciative of your time today and all the things, and I consider you a brother, and I just eternally grateful
Yeah,
for what
love you,
you've
man.
done for my family, for the guidance that you've been able to provide and the insight. And I am a testament because I know I occasionally fire off an email to you with, "Hey, nice job. And tell me more about this because
It's
I'm
all good.
struggling here. I need some help." And you've always come with that smile and that grace and that, "Hey, go check this out and hit me back later." So thank you so
Awesome.
much. With that, we're gonna wrap this episode up. Unless
Awesome.
you
Love
have any last words you want to
nothing,
impart.
man. Encouraging everybody in your and everybody's listening, everybody in the shift audience, man. Keep going, subscribe to it. What Keith's onto here is solid, solid. So keep rolling with him. And I love you guys. Honestly, I'm very honored to be on the show with you, man. Love you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. With that, we're gonna close out episode 1, and we will see you guys on the next one.
See
And
you.
you can subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places. You can check out the book Choose Different, available on Amazon. And if you have feedback, I don't believe in failure, only feedback. So email us at feedback@togetherweshift.com. We'll see you on the next one.